hang on, we're gonna try something different, guys. I can get this to work right. Okay, I think we're good now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an edition of UFO Mind's Eye. I'm your host, and let's get into it. Let's talk about what is really going on behind the scenes. I even made a little list here of things I'm going to start talking about. The first thing I want to do is apologize for the last video. Severe lighting issues. I really don't like those energy saver bulbs. They really screw up my camera. Just hope that this isn't going to happen again. So let's talk about our first subject of the night, and that is Roswell, Area 51, you guys. Did you guys know that even to this day it is still considered to be a working base? They have this facilities underneath the ground of the base that have, secret areas where they're still doing experimentations, where they're still developing, weapons and aircraft. So, back in 1942 or 3, in Roswell, New Mexico, there was what they said flying saucers that crashed in the desert, 5 bodies, which is actually further from the truth. I think that there was more like 6 bodies, because there was actually an alien that lived through the crash that they basically had on their staff after that, years and years and years, who was communicating with our government to work with the UFOs and aliens from other galaxies. And this is all documented stuff. It's all over the internet and books, and there's FBI agents that have formally come forward now, basically talking about what they had seen and what they had been told by our Navy and Army. And so what happened basically was, they found these flying saucers. They found debris all over the desert. There were people like ranchers and farmers and just average people, who basically said, "What is this stuff?" Like, some of it had like hieroglyphics on it. It looked like Egyptian artwork. There was another guy that actually touched the UFO before the government agencies started coming for all the debris, who said that years after that he developed some type of psychic kinetic ability to be able to move objects with his mind. And later on, he actually became an agent for the CIA. And he was helping them basically, with working with people who were psychic, who also could help find killers and, and other stuff. So let's get into the Bob Lazar thing. Bob Lazar, to this day, does not like doing interviews. And if you've ever watched Coast to Coast, which is an AM radio show, it's on late at night. If you're into UFOs and mysteries and unsolved conspiracies, check it out. Great show. So he called in one of these shows, and essentially what happened was he basically started spilling the beans. He basically started saying, I used to work for the federal government. I've been to Roswell. I've been to Area 51. I know what they're keeping in there. He had a friend by the name of Pops, who was a former Army drill sergeant, um, who later on was working at Hangar 18, who actually discovered frozen alien bodies and craft parts that were stored in the hangar. Um, he was basically told by his superiors that if you spill these beans and if you go on the radio and if you tell anybody, we will find you. We will send the on black after you. You will die. Um, that's why for many years he stayed out of the public eye up until the 1990s when he started actually talking to people. Very interesting guy. Look it up. There's interviews all over YouTube and online with Bob Lazar. Very interesting stuff. Um, Now let's talk about Hangar 18. Hangar 18, you guys, was basically something that was created to ship stuff from Roswell and Area 51 to basically the middle of the heartland so that, people can't necessarily find out where these things are. They're also developing weapons from this technology at that base. Where Hangar 18 was. So let's also talk about. Hang on here, I'm losing my track of mind here. Blah blah blah. Okay, Kettsburg, Pennsylvania. Here we go. Kettsburg, Pennsylvania was a small town in near Pittsburgh. I want to say maybe 45 miles from Pittsburgh, possibly maybe 50. It was basically a little town. It was nothing really exciting ever happened up until the 1960s. I think it was 1969, 1970, when basically the Bell crashed. The Bell, if you don't know about it, was a super mega weapon that the Nazis had built in World War II. I'm getting lost here. Okay, yes. The Nazis developed this weapon to be able to time travel so that they could basically go back in time before World War II to basically sabotage the United States from ever getting involved in World War II. We would have basically not had any weapons to defend ourselves. The Germans would have just came in and basically kicked our asses and taken us over. We would have been speaking German right now, and possibly Japanese. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the UFOs have been warning us by communicating with people, basically saying, don't develop weapons of mass destruction. You're going to end up destroying your planet. That's what happened to us. The Majestic 12, the Council of 12 meets, near the Bermuda Triangle. We're basically telling our governments, stop being stupid, don't blow each other up. And isn't it convenient that to this day there's planes and ships that basically just disappear? So Kettsburg, Pennsylvania, let's talk a little about that. There are still survivors who are still living today that say that they had seen the crash. They had seen government agencies and space outfits walking around the premises, basically testing the area for radiation. To this day, that force still has severe issues with developing plant life because of the radiation. And then there's the whole thing about, did they discover anything besides the Bell? Because the government basically came right in right after it crashed several hours. Basically told everybody, if you say anything, you're pretty much gone. We're going to make sure you get wiped out. that's why you don't really want to mess with the UFO investigators that work for the government, because they will screw you over. They will find every possible way to make your life hell. So essentially, what happened in Kecksburg was the spaceship crashed. The community basically said, "This is not a helicopter. This is not a plane. We don't care what you say. We saw what we saw." And they said, "No, you didn't see anything. Don't say anything. If you do, we're gonna make sure that you don't say anything to anybody ever again throughout your whole life." Threatening everybody basically. The Men in Black also showed up to talk to the residents, basically to put fear into them. Again, we'll talk about the Men in Black in a minute here. So that's basically Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Crazy stuff. Yeah, I mean, the intimidation factor for our government is pathetic. What they do to us. I mean, they tap our phones. They spy on our emails. I mean, you guys have no idea what these guys are capable of. They can do just about anything now. So let's move on to the Men in Black. The Men in Black was a secret agency that was developed in the 1940s, shortly after Roswell. Some people say that these people are human, but at the same time they don't really look like it because they don't have eyebrows, they don't have facial hair, they don't even really have hair on their heads, for example. They always dress in black suits, hats, sunglasses. There's no pigment to their eyes. That's interesting. So essentially, don't piss the Men in Black off because they will hunt you down. And there's been several incidents of people actually having Men in Black show up at their house to interview them. And those people were terrified. So let's talk about the CIA. Another government covered up sons of bitches, basically. So when the CIA was formed, the director was Dwight D. Eisenhower, maybe. I think that's who it was. Prescott Bush was also involved, and he was George Bush's senior's father, who was also working with the Nazi banks to fund money to go over to World War II to help the Germans. Isn't that convenient? He's also a member of the Skull and Bones. Isn't that freaking convenient? So, let's be honest here. Do I think the Bush family has always been involved in the CIA and cover-ups? Yes. Hands down, yes. Every evidence proves and points to them having some connection to the Kennedy assassination too. So let's not get that in shock either, because that is also proven that they did have something to do with that, because they were working with Lyndon Johnson. So they didn't like what Kennedy stood for. So let's talk about some of the government cover-ups. Basically, the CIA has been covering up like attacks on our own country, spies that work for other countries that have come into our country to give personal information out, sabotaging elections, sabotaging basically holiday things as well. Like, they have a lot of say basically in what happens in our country. The president doesn't really have much to do with anything. My opinion, I think the CIA kind of just runs our country, but that's just my opinion. So here's my other theory. I think that the CIA invented the deep web. Back in 2001, there was a former CIA agent who admitted that he was the one who discovered how to link into the hidden parts of the deep web, which is the dark part of the internet. Um, the deep web also had many conspiracies, such as websites where people could buy guns, weapons, drugs, hitman for hire, and basically spying on just about anybody for any purpose that they wanted to. And then let's talk about. You know what? I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this, but I'm talking about it anyways. So, the Bush family. There we go. Prescott Bush was a son of a bitch, in my opinion. He was lying to the American public the whole entire time he was basically in charge of the CIA. He helped ordered LSD tests and Program Ultra, where they were experimenting with LSD with the troops to try to use brainwashing material experiments. He was also said to sell private secrets to the Russians to further their nuclear program to get ahead of ours, so he would be able to make more investments overseas than what he was making here in the United States. That's proven. Look it up. It's on the internet. And I don't know. I don't like the Bush family. I never have. I never will. I think they're scum. And isn't it convenient that the Bush family used to be friends with the Bin Laden family when George Jr. was basically growing up. The two families were vacationing with each other. They were communicating. They were basically friends. But the Bushes were extremely jealous because of the Bin Laden's family history in the Saudi government as well, because of all the extra oil and funds that they have. Because basically they're richer than us. I mean, Saudi Arabia's got so much money, it's not even funny. And so years and years and years, they basically made us believe that, Arabian people were, Arab people were basically responsible for what was happening all over the world. I don't really agree with that. I feel like there's more stuff to it. So that is the episode. This is the second episode of UFO's Mind's Eye. I will be back with another episode soon. Thank you, everybody.